Welcome to the Misophonia Podcast. This is episode 15 of season 3. My name is Adil Ahmad, and I have misophonia. The last couple of episodes have been with people in Germany, and this week, another guest from Germany. Olivia actually grew up in the US and is now living and working on a graduate degree in Germany. Her master's thesis will focus on navigating white-collar offices with misophonia and envisioning solutions related to design and policy. This is very near and dear to my heart because I think more awareness in the workplace and in HR will lead to a lot more awareness in society at large. Along the way, Olivia also warns us about clocks in German homes and getting an earplug vacuumed out of her ear. You don't want to miss this. I will say there were some audio issues in this episode, so apologies in advance. I did my best to resolve them, but if it's sometimes hard to make out what Olivia is saying, you might need to wait for the transcript. You can also just email her. She has an email address set up for her research at oliviamisophonia@gmail.com, and I'll have that in the show notes. We're a couple months away from recording season 4, and it's already pretty much booked up. It might even be full, but if it's not, please do grab a slot and come and share your story. Otherwise, stay tuned because these are going to be some amazing conversations coming all throughout 2021. Still some incredible episodes coming up over the next few weeks. All right, but for now, here's my conversation with Olivia. Welcome, Olivia. Welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Thank you. It's really good to be here.
Cool. So, whereabouts are you?
I am in Germany right now, but I'm originally from Arizona. So.
All right. Okay, cool. And are you there? I mean, it sounds like we exchanged some messages before, and it sounds like you're a student there working on some stuff that we'll get into. So is that your main thing there? You're there. Are you in Germany to be a student, or was it were you there for other reasons?
So I originally moved here about almost 4 years ago to teach English. And then I met my husband, who's a German citizen, and we got married. And so now we just live here. And I'm a student additionally.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're teaching English, and you're also back to school yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And what are you studying?
Well, I study. It's called Global Sustainability Science. And it's actually a double master's program with Arizona State University and Leuphana University, which is in the north of Germany, which I no longer live in. I just moved to Nuremberg, so it doesn't really matter because everything's online. But yeah, it's called Global Sustainability Science. And we were supposed to be in Arizona right now doing our third semester, but obviously that's not happening.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, you were supposed to, it's joint, and you're supposed to be back in Arizona. And this is a graduate degree, right?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I guess since you mentioned it, let's talk about that because it sounds like there are some links to misophonia, or misophonia is part of the thesis. Do you want to discuss, you can get into kind of like what the thesis is about and how you arrived at that?
Yeah, I'll try to talk about it as clearly and succinctly as I can at 6 a.m. But my thesis is definitely at the sort of nascent stage, I would say, where I've developed what I want to go into, but I'm not fully clear on which perspective I will take necessarily. But yeah, it's all about navigating white-collar office spaces with misophonia. And obviously, when you hear that, maybe you're kind of thinking, what does that have to do with sustainability? And I've also really thought about that myself. But I think for me, it just exists within that larger realm of mental health and recognizing mental health, getting rid of the stigma of mental health, and also having offices be places where people can have their well-being actually taken care of by their bosses instead of potentially depleted or conditions exacerbated by it.
Yeah, that's something that's come up on this show a number of times is how couple things from the employee perspective. Obviously, I mean, it goes kind of without saying that you're spending so much time at work, you could come home absolutely mentally drained, and what effect that has on you. You're not getting much done, not getting as much done at work, and on the flip side, from the employer perspective, there's it could be a significant impact to the bottom line if some swath of your employees is just ain't doing shit. So or it's not much is happening, and then there's all kinds of I'm sure second order effects of a team kind of being dragged down by the health of some of the members of that team. So yeah, that's many different dimensions there. I don't blame you for not being able to figure out exactly which way to go. I hope you actually explore all that, or as much as possible. But yeah, that's an exciting and unique topic that's personally interesting to me. So
yeah, I think that's the way I kind of approached my master's thesis. Was I was thinking, well, you actually don't have that much time to do something, so you better do something like that you're interested in. Because if you don't, then you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I'm trying to figure out, I don't know, life cycle assessment, and I don't really care about this issue. So that was one reason. But I think the other is I at first approached it from a design perspective. So I don't know, I sometimes watch BuzzFeed videos, and they show their office a lot. And they have like a really authentic open office in the sense of like, I don't know, it just gives me anxiety every time I look at it, because there are people just literally right next to each other. Everyone has to wear these giant headphones because no one, an open office is supposed to be about collaboration. But no one's collaborating because no one can like hear each other over all the typing and stuff. So that sort of brought it to my attention of like, well, why, I mean, obviously they design it quote unquote to be collaborative, but also to save money. But like, what are really the effects of people having to sit here, especially if you have misophonia, and work in an office like this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is a great irony of that is everyone's pretty much got headphones. It's not the idea that was, I guess, sold to HR, which was like all this dynamism and everyone grabbing each other to go to the whiteboard and coming up with some genius light bulb idea. So yeah, that's interesting. So what were you inspired by, observing like in those BuzzFeed videos, or were you actually had you actually experienced something like that personally?
So I've never worked in that kind of open office, which I have to be really thankful for. But I have worked in open offices with cubicles, like not full cubicles, but sort of the half cubicles. And I actually, like before I left the job, my manager approached me to say like, oh, you're a really good customer service rep. You have really good like numbers about that. You could think of pursuing a managing job here at this company. And I thanked him, but in my head I was just going like, but you're a manager and you also have to sit in the cubicles with everybody else. And there's no way I could possibly do this. And I think there could be a problem with retention rate for the fact that not only for misophonics, but for other people who just say, but what's the payoff? Like everyone is treated, I don't want to say like shit, but no one's privacy or anything like that is really respected. And that had to do also with the way the company kind of treated people. Like you weren't allowed to have pens and paper at your desk at one point, and you weren't allowed to ever look at your phone, but it's a customer service job and if you're working the graveyard shift, then, well, you're getting a call like once every hour. So then you just sit there. So I think it tied into the larger aspect of like, how do companies treat their employees? do they treat them like as if they're robots, or do they treat them like they're people? But I do kind of wonder for the jobs that misophonic's maybe they would be really good at if they're just not retained because, well, what's the benefit if you come home with all the stress?
Yeah, absolutely. That's another part of it. The bottom line for, well, obviously health, yeah, health for employees, but bottom line for employers, like the churn of having to replace high, you know, very talented employees is high because you gotta go through the whole HR process and you gotta train
Mm-hmm.
people. It's there's like I said, there's a lot of second order effects too on top of the obvious ones that affect the employee directly. Yeah, there's a lot of different angles here. Um,
Yeah.
are you? I know this is a kind of a nascent state, but are you looking maybe for people to interview to kind of like help out, or is it just too early at this point to know which way you're going to go?
So for right now, I can definitely interview people, but I can't necessarily like. There's a lot of codes on having human subjects as research.
Mm,
So I have to wait until I get that approved by the board.
gotcha.
So
Okay.
if anyone wants to speak to me before January, that would be cool. But in January, yeah, I plan to release a survey. And then for anyone who would like to be interviewed from that survey, they can. Otherwise, it's completely anonymous. And then I would really like to actually have a focus group because I think, there's all the forums, there's the Reddit stuff, but you don't often hear about people talking about misophonics talking, well, in person, but it would be in person if we were allowed to do that, but talking in real life.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I think you
that's
could
an
easily
interesting
set up
aspect.
yeah, you can easily probably set up a Zoom call or something at least,
Mm-hmm.
or if not, get together in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you had a lot of people who'd want to do that. So, yeah, definitely, yeah, hit me up if you. I'd love to,
Mm-hmm.
promote it, whatever survey link or whatever you have, whenever that's ready. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, that would be really
Um,
great. Thank you.
so let's dive into you, I guess, Olivia.
Yeah. Okay.
Your misophonia. Um, tell me how far back do you remember it going?
So I've, I'll just say, like, I'm also self-reported because I think
Yeah,
that's a pretty normal thing.
we have to be.
Uh,
No one, yeah, no one's going around. There's no, misophonologist or anything that's,
yeah. I
look,
mean, you could go to, like, I was really amazed that Duke University opened up the center,
uh,
um, but you have to live in basically you have to live in North Carolina. So,
yeah,
which is still really cool. It's just like, oh, I don't live there. Okay. But yeah, I'm self-diagnosed, but I think I was always a sensitive kid because I can even remember when I was a little kid of getting annoyed when, are we allowed to talk about triggers or,
yeah. No, you can talk
okay,
about triggers.
okay,
Yeah,
okay. When the fan would click, like if a ceiling fan isn't properly installed, it'll make this clicking sound.
yeah.
Um, but I think actually it really began when I was like 9. And I just remember um, there was one summer where the sound just really started to bother me, and it was cicadas. And in Arizona, you have annual cicadas, and it had never bothered me before, but all of a sudden it was just like unbearable. And I wore earplugs that entire summer, and my parents were quite freaked out. Um,
Mm,
and they were like, what is going on? Like, and I also didn't like the sound of clocks ticking. I remember that. And at that time, I also started to really develop a hatred towards the sound of typing. It,
uh,
it wasn't as strong as it became later, but it was just like, I don't know. But I think the cicadas really started
yeah, they can get kind of they can get kind of
it.
crazy. We just ended summer here in Minnesota, and yeah,
Oh,
they
yeah.
get loud. They get loud in the Midwest. So yeah, interesting. So not the maybe the a lot of the usual kind of eating sounds and whatnot. More
Not
environmental
at first,
sounds
yeah.
and yeah,
But I
well,
think that partially
environmental
has,
and action sounds, yeah.
Yeah, I guess a lot more mechanical sounds, but definitely by the time I think I hit, I don't know, I would say 13, gum chewing would really bother me. Gum chewing still really, really bothers me.
Yeah. Did you start noticing that at school first?
So I was quite lucky in that, obviously in elementary school, gum was like completely banned. So maybe that's why I didn't notice it. And then in my middle school, gum was also banned. And then in high school, that's when they started to like open it up again. So I think that's how I really became more aware of it.
Yeah.
But also, I do remember like being in church, someone would be chewing gum like really crazily, and just sitting there like, oh my God, like what is he doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. But for me, I think one of the weird things is food chewing doesn't bother me nearly as much unless it's super obvious. Like for some reason, to
Right.
my ears, the gum chewing, it's a different kind of chewing. I think people are generally more like loose with their mouths. I don't know, or they chew at a different rate. I have no idea.
Yeah, yeah. And so all these like the gum and the mechanical stuff,
Hmm.
it was definitely like fight or flight. Like you
Yeah.
um yeah, yeah. And then so it doesn't sound like your family members were not really big triggers, at least in the beginning, right? For a while, or did that quickly start to encompass
So
them as well?
I think this is going to reflect a lot of what the other people said is that my dad was kind of the trigger in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of ways because he was the one who would be on the computer at home. Um, and obviously, you were back in the 90s, so you had those keyboards
Oh
that
yeah.
were like the IBM keyboards that were super loud. And I just remember like telling him he had to stop. And my dad is also someone who likes to really suck candy, and that was also
Mm.
something I just couldn't stand. So I think my dad tried to be aware to a certain degree, but then he also had that sort of, I guess, the way that he also grew up is just like you just have to get used to it, like exposure therapy kind of idea.
Yeah. So you
Um,
did talk to him
but
about
he
it
since
then, or
apologized for that. Yeah, I
gosh,
definitely talked to him. Yeah, and I think my
yeah.
parents were quite worried about it, so I did see a therapist because of it when I was,
Mm.
I think, in sixth grade.
Okay,
They were
so
definitely aware.
this is before all the gum chewing thing. It was when it was still very
Hmm.
mechanical stuff. In the late elementary
Yeah,
school or early junior high, they had you see a therapist. Okay.
yeah, I think it was for more than that because it's also getting like quite bad social anxiety about going to
Mm-hmm.
school. And maybe that had partially to do with just like being surrounded by all of these sounds, teachers typing constantly on the computer while you're taking tests or things like that.
Yeah, I was
Um,
going to ask if you felt like it was, with the social anxiety was caused mainly from misophonia, or you genuinely did have um, other things going on.
I think I probably had other things going on, but I think the misophonia definitely exacerbated it. And it was
Mm-hmm.
always like, oh, I'm going to be in this environment that isn't predictable, where I'm going to have all these feelings that I don't know what to do with. And
Yeah,
I guess
yeah,
by this point, um, misophonia had been named, but of course, no one knew about it. So it
right.
was kind of like no one had any idea. But I do remember the therapist that we saw, like when we talked about the sounds. Like one time, he actually said to my parents, like, no, but some people actually are hurt by sound. Like it's not someone making it up. So I think that was always something that stuck in my head of like, oh, like someone actually recognizes that I'm not just crazy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's around when was that? So that what do you know around what year that was?
It must have been like 2002. So I guess a year
Okay.
after Jabberwocky or whatever made the paper.
Yeah. I mean, that's super early for
Hmm.
somebody in where you were to kind of hear about it and mention it. So did that therapist try to treat the misophonia as well, on top of the social anxiety stuff? And if so, like what kind of stuff did they do?
So he didn't try to treat it. So I think that he maybe was coming. I mean, this is just my conjecture. but I think he was coming from knowledge of like hypercusis or tinnitus. I can never say that word.
Hyperacusis, I think.
Yeah, hypercusis. Thank you.
So like an extra sensitivity for sound, yeah.
Yeah, because he never said like it's misophonia or like anything like that. I think he just sort of was there for me to talk to him. I don't think he ever recommended anything because, you know, what could you recommend at that point? Besides either exposure therapy, I think, which I think is still to this day kind of a common thing to hear, or avoidance. So I don't know if there's anything in between.
I know. Yeah, that's you're right. I mean, I have never thought about it such a binary way, but yeah, it's either your exposure, which I hear overwhelmingly that, well, at least the people I talk to, it hasn't worked, and then avoidance, which is the flight portion of the fight or flight. And then there have been, well, we won't get into too much of it. There has been, occasions of the fight aspect, but yeah, you're right. It's like avoidance or using tools like headphones or blah 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 to kind of get over it, or legal maneuvers like ADA and 504s and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I guess when you're a kid, he's probably not going to recommend that, I think.
Right.
Yeah. But I do remember that one of the things I think that it allowed my parents to just like sort of see by him saying that was, okay, so you're already trying to be understanding, but also like you don't have to be so freaked out that I don't know, that I have like some sort of mental condition, that this is something that does exist and it doesn't have to be so severe. And I think it allowed for me to find coping mechanisms. Some of them not so sustainable. One time I got an earplug stuck in my ear and I had to get it vacuumed out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Wear the proper size earplugs, like that's my up there. Yeah. But for them to just be like, okay, like sometimes she needs to use these coping mechanisms and we don't need to say like, no, this isn't allowed at all.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so your parents were a bit reassured that a professional had heard of this at least, and that you weren't making it up, or there was something real. How did it start? Did it affect maybe your social circles at school, at that young age and going into high school, like kind of who you associated with and how you interacted with other students?
I think to some degree it did. I think if I had a friend who was chewing gum, I would just try to leave the room. So that I'm sure that was quite awkward. And I know sometimes like someone in the hallway or something would like pop their gum, and I would give them like the death stare, and my friends would be like, "What are you doing?" Like, because I was like usually quite a passive person, and why are you doing this? And I think it also definitely affected where I would go. So for example, like when I go to the movies, I would really like to go either super early in the morning, like when only senior citizens go, like 10 a.m. in the morning. Or I would like to pick really strange seats, like never in the middle of the theater, because that was just too overwhelming to be like stuck right in the center. And not going to certain parties sometimes because I didn't know like what the atmosphere would be, or I knew a certain person would be there who really chewed gum quite loudly. And I think, just not forming probably friendships with some people because I saw what they were doing and I was like, oh no, I can't take that. Like, no.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What about grades in school? Did it start to affect grades as you were getting to high school and whatnot, getting ready to go to college?
So, no, actually, which when I think back to it, I'm quite impressed by. I think though what it did affect is my attendance. I think I got perfect grades in high school, but I think that's partially because my parents would let me stay home. Sometimes I just couldn't go to school. I just needed to have a mental health day. And I took basically the maximum amount of absentees you could take every term. So I think that really helped me, but it definitely affected like the way I would sit in class, sometimes my attention levels, and I would just have to make that up later of like learning what the teacher said, because I had been trying to like covertly plug my ears because another student was doing something.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. And it sounds like at this point you're at home. Your parents are quite accommodating to you, right? What was life like at home?
Yeah, I think my parents, like especially compared to a lot of other parents, were quite understanding. I think they still have some ideas about exposure therapy, but I think that's pretty natural, especially if you grew up in the 1960s and stuff. I think it's a pretty natural attitude.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were pretty accommodating. Like my dad would try to not be typing so much while we were out in the living room, and try to be somewhat conscious of his chewing. And my mom, who does also like to chew gum, she said, "Oh, I had never thought about it. Like I had never thought about how I chew, and now like when I'm in a public place, like I actually, try to chew with my mouth closed."
Gotcha.
So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah. And yet, do you have any siblings or only child?
I don't. I'm an only child, so I guess that's also an easier way to deal with it, because you don't have a sibling who maybe knows your triggers and like
beating you up and bugging you.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Or vice versa, you're beating them up for triggering you. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So now I guess that takes us to kind of to college. So you're I guess did you go right into ASU, or did you do something else for undergrad?
So I went to a university in Ohio for undergrad. And I think like a lot of people, I had certain expectations of what that would look like. So it was quite a rude awakening for me when I kind of got there, and it was full of a lot of people who were, I would say, super into partying, which obviously a college student is into partying, but I kind of thought like, oh, I'm going to this kind of like somewhat prestigious school, so everyone's going to be really serious about studying. And then it was something that I had never experienced before, which is bass music, like music with a lot of bass and people just playing it super loud. I grew up in the suburbs, and people always had the HOA on you and the noise ordinance on you if you did stuff like that. So I guess I acquired a new trigger because I had never heard that before. And it would come when I was trying to study or when I was trying to sleep, and it was just this really stressful situation. And I think it really contributed to my first year, which was it was a really hard year. Where, obviously I was away from home. I experienced my first time of ever having seasonal depression because I had never been in an actual winter before in my life. But also I was trying to get accustomed to all these new sounds and to sharing a room with someone who also made sounds. So it was quite an interesting year.
Yeah, that is a lot going on. Yeah, you're right. You're seasonal. If you haven't been in winter, and then new misophonia and all the school stuff. Did you make it through that year and keep going, or how did you?
I definitely made it through. I went to therapy. I didn't really go for misophonia. I didn't really talk to her much about that, but my school's counselor, I definitely talked to her, my school's therapist. She definitely helped me think of some ways of trying to change my thinking or having coping mechanisms of telling me, it's okay that you're having not a great time. That is okay. You're allowed to feel like that. I think that was really validating. And I don't know, I remember in my last year, we lived across people who really like to have a good time and to party. And the way I coped with that is kind of a crazy way of, I had found this projector room in my school that would stay open basically all night. And you could stream movies through it. And so I would just go there. Sometimes I took a friend, but I would just go there by myself and just wait for the parties to be closed down. which is not great for your sleep schedule. But yeah, it is what it is. But
Yeah.
I think I just continued all the high school ones. Like I always wear earplugs when I go to sleep. I would avoid the library unless I could get this one seat in the basement. There was oddly a computer in the basement in the stack that it was like my favorite place to be, and I would go there if I could. And I think, yeah, just wearing headphones when I could. Like if I had to, I don't know, be trying to think of where I would wear headphones. I went to a really small university. But yeah, if I had to be in the library in the big rooms, I would try to wear like headphones and stuff like that. So I think just all the stuff that I had done before.
Yeah, there's all kinds of little sonic grenades being launched in a university library.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't blame you. All right, so yeah, and obviously you were like super smart, and so your brain can like scholastically get you through. So
yeah. Well,
yeah,
thank
that
you. I
must have
don't know if
been.
I'm super smart at work. I'm just a perfectionist to some degree.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, yeah, no, you did well in high school, and yeah, obviously you're doing grad school here. So, yeah, thank God for that. And that got you. That got you. I think obviously had a big part of you getting through there. Um, and so obviously you're not partying, you're not partying with all these people. But did you find? I mean, did you find your own? You found your own group of friends, I guess, in
Mm-hmm.
uh, in university. By the way, anybody by this point had you met anybody else who had misophonia?
So I think I went to university in like 2008, and I'm trying to think if that had been a widely like known thing. I don't think I had met anyone who said, "Oh, I have misophonia" yet,
Right. Yeah.
but I have met people, and I remember meeting people at university also who were sensitive.
Hmm.
So I know that it existed, but we never really talked about, like, we never had like a sesh about, oh my God, this person annoys me so much, and don't you hate it when, like, but that's definitely where I started to meet people who were also like, no, like, sounds bother me as well.
So while you were there in Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
you did meet people who were very sensitive to sounds. Okay. Yeah. I mean, around that point, I think it was there was also the other term, selective sound sensitivity
Mm-hmm.
syndrome, which was going around, which I'm sure was even less of a buzz, less of a
Yeah.
catchy phrase for people, regular people to know. So, um,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay. And then yeah, so once you graduated, kind of what did you do? Did you just is that when you did you just kind of dive into grad school at that point, or was there a little break when you were working?
So there was about a 7 year break
Hmm.
between
Hmm.
undergrad and graduate. Um, so between that time, I worked at an insurance company that will remain nameless, where I had to work in the open offices.
Hmm.
Um, and then I went to teach English in Korea for 2 years, and then I came
Mm.
to Germany to teach English. So
Wow. Okay. But did you go to other countries because you obviously because you want to teach English to others, not because you want to run away from people from sounds, I
I
would
would not
imagine.
recommend Korea as a
Yeah.
place to run away from
Yeah.
misophonia, just in case anyone's wondering.
Okay. Yeah. 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 So yeah. So you've been to right, Korea and Germany. Maybe yeah. Maybe it's just without like getting into any cultural stuff, but I'm just curious,
Mm-hmm.
like just kind of misophonia awareness, and environmental, yeah, the kind of
Mm.
like what's it like for misophones, and then I'd be also curious to know if you had a sense of any awareness of misophonia in those countries.
So I really love Korea, but I don't think there's any awareness for misophonia.
Right.
Um,
Any about what about mental health in general, do you think, in Korea?
so this is just my perspective, but I think it's also backed
Yeah.
up by, if you watch a lot of videos from Koreans and you look at the policies in Korea and you talk to other expats who have been to Korea, that Korea is at the very beginnings of accepting what mental health is.
Hmm. Hmm.
People don't want to talk about the fact that they have depression. They don't want their bosses knowing. Um, I remember one of the first things that we learned, and I'm not sure how true this is still, because this was about 5 years ago, so hopefully it's changed a bit. But I remember people saying like, don't say the word like, oh, you're so crazy, like crazy, like, oh, you're so funny, you're so whatever, because the way that it's translated into Korea is like you're actually crazy, and that's a really, really bad thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's quite insulting, and kids will get quite angry about it. They'll be like, no, I'm not. Like, so there's still this need for an ongoing awareness of mental health, and that having depression doesn't mean that you're like sort of a lost cause, and it isn't something that should be swept under the rug. So I think it's quite an interesting place to be. So I never talked about my misophonia in Korea. And I think also at that point, it was just something I kind of wanted to hide, and something I kind of just wanted to like hope would go away sometime.
Right. Okay. So you hoped your own misophonia was going to go away during that time?
I guess just during my lifetime. I just hoped that it was just something like eventually they would find a cure for it, and then I would be fine.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then I guess you said you're in Korea, and stigma is
yeah
couldn't
still
do
a big
much.
issue.
Right. What about and then you were being triggered a lot over there, right?
In some ways, yeah. In some ways, more. But that's also because I think my life changed quite dramatically in the sense, like, well, when I lived in the States, because I lived in suburbia and in Arizona, the public transit at that point was quite terrible. I never took the bus. But now, when you're in Korea, you're taking the bus. Like, if you want to go to Seoul, you're taking the bus every weekend. And being in public transit, when you haven't had to really rely on that in your lifetime, is quite jarring.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of gum chewing and lots of sounds like popping gum.
Right.
I think that was the main thing. And I think too, sometimes like eating was also quite hard because like when you're eating super hot food, you have to like eat quite loudly sometimes. So, I mean, I love Korea, like, so, like, don't let your misophonia stop you from going to Korea. Just be aware that.
It's a great place. Definitely, many great things about Korea. But yeah, just get to know. And public transportation, is rough anywhere. It sounds like if you would if it was kind of your first major foray into it, that's going to be rough. Hey, and let's talk a bit about then. Did you go directly from Korea to Germany? Like relatively.
Almost. I had a few months where I stayed with my parents while I was trying to like figure out the paperwork and stuff.
Yeah.
But so I came to Germany, and Germany is kind of a weird situation in some ways.
Okay.
Because it's great in a lot of ways in the sense of they have noise ordinances, and they actually stick by them. So, for example, you're not allowed to make noise between these certain hours, or you're not supposed to make like excessive noise.
So that's that's individual people out on the street, or is it just a more intense version of that of like like late night noise ordinances that you get in those suburban HOAs?
So it's kind of both, because it's definitely like apartment within your apartment building.
Okay.
And where people are allowed to have parties and stuff like that. And then for bars and stuff, they can only be in like certain kind of areas, I guess, because most neighbors wouldn't accept that they have like a bar like next to them if there doesn't need to be one. Like obviously there are certain areas that it's very popular to have bars, but you know that when you move in. But also things close. Like we just moved to Bavaria, and grocery stores close at 8 o'clock at night. So when you're closing places, because of these different reasons, then like also the sound goes away.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that's good. So it sounds like it's a more miso-friendly environment because of these kind of regulations.
I mean, yeah, I think so. I think it can be, especially if you have triggers that are brought on by loud music or things like that. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not like, don't come here expecting that it's like a peaceful Zen place, I guess, because, you can still be triggered on public transit, which will
Right.
certainly be using.
That's kind of universal, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think Japan was the only place I've ever been to where I didn't see people chewing gum in public.
Mm.
And so I think it's just a thing worldwide. But it's definitely, I think people have a bit more of an old school also approach to certain things, like of manners, sort of more like you may have experienced like from your grandparents or something about chewing food with your mouth closed and things like that. So it's not always followed, but a lot more people are aware of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because we were talking earlier about how old school can sometimes just bottle things up, but then old school could also mean better manners. Being a little bit more disciplined in that way.
Yeah.
And so, what are some of the other than public transportation in Germany? What would you say are some of the things that are maybe unique about Germany that can, or if there's anything unique about Germany that can kind of cause issues? Oktoberfest, slamming beer mugs and stuff.
I actually still haven't been to Oktoberfest, but I would say definitely be aware that Germans really, really love analog clocks. And I don't mean cuckoo clocks, like you don't find many people have cuckoo clocks in their house because they're also very annoying to like normal people. Or to people who don't have misophonia, sorry. But just clocks, like people love analog clocks, and they'll have them in every room of their house, and they'll be the ones that have the second hand that's ticking, and that's something to be aware of. Trying to think, that's a good question.
No, that's good. That's right. That I would not have thought of that. Yeah, that's the kind of thing.
I just think about it because my husband's mother, who's a very lovely woman, has clocks in every single room, and every time we go there, I'm just like,
right.
She's even taken them down because when I first went there with him, he was very nice enough to say that he had a problem with them because I didn't want to like meet these people and be like, yes, I don't like your clock. Like, please take it down. So
yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah, I've heard that where somebody takes the fall for people's misophonia. Sounds like you had a conversation. Curious how you talked to your husband about that when you met. Was it proactive or was it a reactive kind of situation?
The funny thing is I don't remember, but I must have had a sort of a proactive thing of being like, by the way, sounds bother me. Certain sounds bother me.
Yeah.
So like if I don't sit somewhere in public transit or if I stand up and like I stand somewhere else, it doesn't mean like I'm angry at you. It just maybe means there's like a trigger nearby and I have to read it. And I think it may have also come up when we took our first trip together because I think we flew to like Georgia or something. And I was like, hey, listen, like I'm going to be like probably not the greatest person when we're at the airport and on the plane because of these
and around
reasons.
The people and around eating and around public transit.
And around gum because it's an airport. So like, so I think I was probably proactive.
Okay. And so he's gotten used to it.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's accepted it. He doesn't seem to put up much of a thing of like, well, you just got used to it. Like he doesn't say anything like that. So.
Yeah, that would be bad news.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But for him, but
Yeah, for him and for us. And,
yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Interesting. So so yeah, you're in Germany now, and and are you? What about awareness? Oh, yeah. I guess did we talk about awareness? I guess in Germany.
No, we didn't. No. So, I mean, if I'm wrong, anyone can like please like reach out. But as far as I know, there is no awareness. I've never seen a group about it. I've never seen any flyers or something about it. Like my German isn't perfect, so I don't read German magazines. So maybe it has been in a German magazine and I'm just not aware. Or maybe they call it something else. Sometimes they don't use Latin words, they use Germanic words, so maybe it's called something else. But I've never seen anything about it, but I've also never tried to get treatment or any kind of therapy in Germany. So maybe there are people who are aware of it, but I kind of doubt it, personally.
Yeah, I know there's something there's research going on in Amsterdam, so some of the neighboring countries, other countries in Europe are talking about it. But it's pretty patchy over there in Europe.
Yeah.
There are countries I've talked to people, there's like zero awareness. I haven't talked to a lot of people from Germany. Obviously, a lot of people there. So you would think that somebody's got to, it's got to be, something's got to be happening there. But it's interesting.
Yeah.
Mental health in general. I know, I know people in Germany, and I've definitely heard of, the mental health being, an issue in certain kind of, certain types of mental health. But I'm curious if, in general, from your perspective, is it taken seriously?
So
I guess compared to Korea, it is.
Compared to Korea. Once again, love Korea, but needs to get some progress on that. So this is a difficult question to answer because I've also heard that too from people who, especially if they're like in a tiny village, maybe sort of mental health isn't seen as something that's that concerning. But in my experience overall, like actually Germany is quite good. It always depends on the kind of job you have. But there are jobs where you can take a leave of absence because of mental health. And it can be quite lengthy. And of course, in Germany, you have 4 to 6 weeks of paid vacation. So, you're not deciding whether or not you take a sick day or you take your vacation. Like, you do one or you do the other. Like, it's not really a choice. When you're in certain privileged positions, I don't know what the situation is like if you're like in the restaurant business, but if you're in like research or you're in, I think a lot of other kinds of jobs that just require you to have like a bachelor's degree. So the system is more aware, I would say, than the American system. You can get coverage for mental health. Sometimes it's not always the best, depending on your provider, because it also there still is a parity between mental health coverage versus physical health, I would say. But I think people are more aware in the system. I think for individual issues, because Germany is not a very individualistic country compared to the US, but the US is like the most individualistic country. There isn't that much awareness for like saying like, oh, I have this, like, so I have like physical or a mental, what are they called? Like a companion dog for when you have lots of stress and stuff like that. For those kind of like issues where you're saying, I've made this, like I've had this special accommodation for myself, there isn't that much awareness, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah,
the healthcare system is overall, you're right. That system is great over there in general for healthcare. And if you can get, if you can get your condition or whatever it is recognized, I'm sure there are a lot of opportunities there, more so than here. Where it seems like people talk about it a lot, there's more awareness, but nothing gets covered here. So
nothing gets covered. But I think I've never been to a therapist in Germany. I can imagine that some of them could be quite old school and be like, what are you talking about? But I can also imagine that, the system covers it and that you can go there and you can at least talk to them and say like, hey, they found this in this paper. This is what I have. Like, I would like to think about cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that.
So I guess, I'm curious now, your own thesis and maybe other research you've done in preparation for it or leading up to it in some way.
Hmm.
Have you been reading many papers or reading any literature to kind of um, inform your understanding of misophonia? Um,
Hmm. Yeah,
in the lead up to it,
definitely.
and yeah,
Yeah.
maybe talk about what are some of the standout interesting things that you've come across.
Well, since you brought up Amsterdam, I was really shocked when I read well, I'm sorry, I'm going to totally forget it, but the sort of codex they had made from Amsterdam of like trying to screen for misophonia. I was like, oh, that's like just right next to us, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
That was quite stand out. I mean, I think a lot of people talk about the case study, the desire for deafness. I thought that was
Oh.
quite a shocking paper to read, um, especially because sometimes I've also wished I was deaf, but I've never sought elective surgery to bring that about. Um, I think the misophonia papers have never super, I guess, shocked me necessarily because it's like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, that makes sense. Um, I think sometimes when I've read papers that are kind of from the mid thousands about exposure therapy, where people are like really trying to promote it, I'm like, yeah, sure. Like maybe it will
Right.
work, but then they always say like, well, we did this with a patient for over a year, and they came to us like 3 times a week, and you're like, okay, but that's not a realistic treatment for anybody, but especially for people in the U.S. It's not a realistic idea of treatment. Um, so I think that also kind of spurred the topic because you also have to just think of like realistic treatment or realistic coping mechanisms because going to therapy 3 times a week and being part of a study is probably not going to happen.
Yeah, that's a lot of us are like, I mean, I'm not holding my breath for a cure. So a lot of this
Yeah.
is the things I'm most interested in are the things like your thesis topic is like, okay, um, I have to advocate for myself and I got to figure out how to make this work at work. Now
Mm-hmm.
I work from home, but
Mm-hmm.
I've spent many years working in the same kind of environments as BuzzFeed. And so, yeah, like a lot of people. So,
Yeah.
it's, yeah, the papers I'd be more interested in reading are the ones like yours. Is like what are the
Oh,
interesting
okay.
ways
Cool.
maybe that what would be the interesting ways to kind of deal with stuff and how can I take this knowledge and take it to my employer and convince them
Yeah.
that they need to pay attention to this and make some
Yeah.
changes.
And I think that
So
kind of brings up something I'm kind of shocked by is that HR, from my experience, like if anyone has anything where HR has actually made a change in sound sensitivities, but I have not seen that in any HR sort of manual or any HR study. And I find that quite incredible, especially when you can read research that's been done on the effects of open offices on people, but still that's not included in the HR thing. Maybe it's because they can't do anything. They can't change the design of an office. But I think it's so strange that the sound wouldn't be a part of it when they talk about light, when they talk about ergo therapy kind of things, that sound doesn't come into the equation.
yeah, I would love to compare notes as you were starting to do this because I might sound like a broken record on this podcast, but I've mentioned it a bunch of times where I want to I want to put together, I don't know, like a training session or
Mm-hmm.
something on the website where it's information for HR folks to get on this because if we can convince them that this is going to affect the bottom line of the company,
Yeah.
someone them in that HR department can get promoted from with this kind of genius realization, and that we can retain people better. We can
Mm-hmm.
attract more people because misophones, as Dr. Johnson mentioned, are um, I wouldn't say overwhelming, but a lot of them are engineers, and so
Mm-hmm.
which notoriously hard people to attract, retain, and
Mm-hmm.
pay, and yeah, I've thought about going to HR, and I've done some talks where I've had like at a local tech conference where I had an HR team come just out of curiosity, and we started to riff on that, and I could see the light bulb kind of go off over their head, where they're like, "Yeah, this is I had no idea what misophonia was. I came randomly to this talk, and now I'm thinking about how to make some changes." And so
Yeah.
I think it doesn't take much to convince them and see them to see the light. Yeah, so that's why I'm excited to have you on the podcast, because this is such an interesting topic that I think we can actually like make um, a movement within
Yeah.
HR that can spread, and that can just raise awareness to employees. I mean, imagine you're a
Mm-hmm.
new employee and you're like, never heard about this. This is bothering you
Mm-hmm.
for so long, and you hear about it, and now suddenly you have another person who's aware. I think you can make some
Mm-hmm.
have a big impact in misophonia awareness as well. So
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think I would love to do that. Yeah, like share notes and like get your perspective, because I think one of the other things I'm quite interested with this aspect is, as much as when I hear a trigger, I would love to actually ban it.
yeah,
You know, I know that actually that's quite a restrictive thing, and that I've been told by other people that actually, like, when they chew gum very loudly, when they snap gum, it's like a relaxation technique for them. So I think,
yes, I've heard of that too. I mean, there's all these stupid tics that and habits that people do. It's not just chewing
yeah,
gum, but
yeah, but all other kinds of things, yeah. So I think for me, one of the things I'd be interested in, also just exploring with an HR concept, is like flexibility in the office place.
hmm
That you say, like, okay, like, well, if there's a trigger near you, you can pick a different office place to work at, or you can have a white noise machine, or you can wear earphones. Because I think there are people who work for giant corporations where literally nothing is allowed, you know? So
yeah,
you're asking people to work in these positions where, you know, you already are working at a job that maybe isn't that interesting, but now on top of it, you're working at a job where you can't even seek some kind of uh, relaxation in your job. So, like, you don't want to, at least in my perspective, you don't want to impose that on anybody. You don't want to say, well, you can't chew gum at all. Like, obviously, if you don't have a job on the phone, you probably shouldn't be chewing gum.
you're right.
But it is what it is. It does happen. But I think, which is also saying, like, have awareness, have modalities for people to seek, and have flexibility. Like, oh, okay, you have a sound sensitivity disorder, or you have hyper. I can't even say it anymore. Anyways,
Hyperacusis, yeah.
yes, thank you. Then we have like a special room, or we have a special part of the office for that.
Yeah, you might want
Where
to.
people are more aware.
Yeah, you might want to. So I've moved to Minnesota from. I spent many years in San Francisco, so um, I've been to many uh, like tech companies in like the last 10 years. Those all those modern tech companies that hear about having like
Mm-hmm.
slides in their lobby and whatnot. But
Yoga.
yeah, all that stuff. So I've worked at those companies and also like done interviews
Mm-hmm.
at a lot of the other companies or had meetings, and so I get kind of introduced to. I get to see all their different environments, and you might want to just try to make connections, or I can maybe help you. But I've seen like there seems to be trends towards multimodal environments where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you got your open space, but then you have there's the big conference rooms, but then there's small conference rooms. There's like little
Mm-hmm.
breakout rooms. There's little. I even saw at one branch of PayPal, like almost like bunk bed kind of situations, and
Oh, wow.
as part of their lounge, like just different places you can escape to that are not just on the
Mm-hmm.
same level, but above, like interesting little like telephone booths kind of thing. And you see that everywhere now, but just
Yeah.
all kinds of
The
different
telephone
little
booth is like my
places.
favorite thing to see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's, I mean, you can go to like any WeWork if they still exist, but to get
Mm.
some ideas as well. But yeah, a lot of these different companies have different. Yeah, they're coming up with different types of little rooms and environments that you can run off to. So, I've seen that explode kind of in San Francisco and beyond. Reassured. I don't think there's any miscellaneous necessarily in the handbook, but I feel like it's kind of in the zeitgeist where to bring this back to a German term, but that there's something happening, and this is a perfect moment for this kind of work to be talked about. So
yeah, that's like a really great idea, because I have met other people who have said like, oh, are you sure that's true? And then I'm like, where do you work? And they're like, I work at Google. And I'm like, oh, yeah, for you, maybe it's not true. Like, you work at one of the premier companies. But I think, a lot of modalities can be copied over from those companies. And I think the other thing that I kind of want to ask on the survey or in the interviews on the focus group is there can be a disparity between the formal rules and the informal rules. So, for example, you have this policy that says, yes, we're very, mental health friendly and blah, 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 blah. But like in reality, your bosses aren't aware of it. Maybe it's quite like, oh, you took a mental health day. Like, okay, good job at wasting your time. Like, there can be a disparity between the two aspects.
That's an interesting angle, especially when the thing that came to mind is the trend of the unlimited vacation, where it's like, you have unlimited vacation, but you can't take it if you're in. Usually those companies are super high pressure, so you have unlimited vacation, but you're going to get it's going to be super frowned upon if you you basically always have a deadline pretty much. So when you can actually take a vacation, these kinds of subtexts that are not talked about beyond the headline of some amazing perk. That'd be kind of an interesting thing to explore as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a good thing just to discuss also, because I think that kind of opens the conversation up to like, okay, well, what else is your company offering? Like maternity leave, but people are kind of being shamed into not taking it.
What's maternity leave? I'm in the United States. No, just kidding. But I know what you mean.
What are we talking about?
Yeah. I'm actually.
Or just even maternity leave. We still have to fight for maternity leave. So.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really interesting topic, and I think it kind of then brings it up to other things, because as I'm trying to explain it to professors, I'm like, oh God, like, why would you care about this issue? It's very, as far as it's a very niche issue. I mean, I think one paper said there's maybe 20% of the population that has it, but that hasn't been proven, and people have it at all different kinds of severity levels. So also trying to get it through to people of like, oh, it's also connected though to like wider issues of how we treat employees, the kinds of messages we send out, mental health in general.
No, I mean, I think this avenue is a great way to potentially break this thing open to kind of really reach a lot of people who have it but don't realize that they have it. So I think it could be definitely interesting. Well, I guess we're already like kind of over an hour here. I can go on, as you can tell. I can go on and on. I'm sure you can too. But I guess I'd love to maybe talk about this more as you're getting deeper into your into the project, and obviously in January, coming up whenever you have the survey ready, I'd love to promote it. But is there anything else maybe you kind of want to tell folks or raise awareness to? Or not, whatever.
Or not, but I think maybe just like saying something that was really helpful for me as I got older was saying like, think of something to say to people, like if something's really bothering you, go through it several times, make sure it's not going to be offensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that you can communicate to people. Sometimes people don't have the greatest reaction when you ask them to stop something, even if you ask them really nice, but that's just the way some people are. I mean, you can ask them to wear a mask and they still get upset. So
right.
It's going to happen. But that most people aren't aware of what they're doing, and that if you just ask them really nicely and you give a reason, that they might be quite open to your request.
Yeah, no, that's Yeah, that's important because we, in our heads, we obviously think that they're here to kill us, but they're probably not even aware what's going on, and they
Yeah,
wouldn't mind. They wouldn't mind taking a small step to give you a little bit of sanity. So yeah,
yeah,
that's an important, always an important reminder. So
yeah.
well, yeah, Olivia, yeah, thanks. It's been a great conversation. Like I said, I could, yeah, I'm sure we could keep going on about this. Definitely will want to follow your work here. Um, yeah, but I want to, yeah, thanks again for telling us about the your work, your life, and yeah, very excited.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very excited. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olivia. Again, you can contact Olivia at oliviamisophonia@gmail.com. You can also reach out to me anytime on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast or Twitter at Misophonia Show. Also email me at hello@misophoniapodcast.com. If you're enjoying the shows, please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.